Religious government officials who use their office to push their ideologies on everyone continue to cost taxpayers a devilishly large amount of money each year. In a move that surprised absolutely no one, the ACLU announced a victory for religious liberty and free speech in the form of a settlement between a Pennsylvania school district and an organization called the After School Satan Club. The school district, citing dubious reasons, rescinded permission for that club to meet at the school. This comes hot on the heels of a federal judge finding that the school had, quote, likely violated the club's First Amendment rights. The district, realizing that its legal case was going to hell in a handbasket, settled faster than you can say hallelujah. As a result, the district dropped 200 grand in the ACLU's donation plate and promised to never discriminate against that club or similar clubs ever again. The story doesn't end there, however. Let's explore this case, which puts some of the school board members on a highway to hell. This story is from LeeValleyLive.com by Kurt Bressvine. So, in this story, when I first saw the court's decision in this case, I had mixed feelings. On one hand, I was happy that the court decided against the obviously unconstitutional actions by the school board. On the other hand, there are several aspects of this case that still sadden me. But in preparing for this story, I did some research and found some new information that made me a bit hopeful. Before I get into that, you know me, I like to dig into legal issues, and I'll sort of do the background of this case, of what the law is. But before we go into that, the happy part and the legal issues, I wanted to get everybody's opinion. So, Kelley, what are your thoughts about this case?
Actually, when I first read the story, I was like, this is so awesome. Now, I've been on nonprofits 1.5 years or so. This is the third time we've covered a story about this organization, and they keep winning in court. Every time, and it blows me away that the people who are running these public schools can knowingly break the Constitution, all because it's something that they think is icky and they don't like it. And let's face it, these are educators. If they unknowingly went against the Constitution, they probably shouldn't be in their jobs to begin with. And one of the things that kind of, now this one's about a middle school, but usually when these stories come up, it's about an elementary school. And I was maybe thinking maybe some of the students' mentality is rubbing off on these administrators, that they're not thinking this stuff all the way through. One of the things about this story, though, and it came up in the last story that I covered about this, is that I think it's probably one of the most important things too, is the fact that someone actually called the school and threatened to show up at the meeting with a gun and shoot middle school students. How is it that people can get so worked up about their belief in a loving God that they're willing to make death threats to preteens? It blows me away. And I have a problem with it. I want to kind of like dive more into this subject, but I want to give everybody a chance. So, Infidel, let's hear what you have to say about it first.
Like you, I've been following this story and cheering on the sidelines every time it was discussed on nonprofits, because I didn't get a chance to participate. And I was like, oh man, this is great. And seeing this group continue to win one again and again. And it definitely is something that I have to admit, I expected it to drag on longer. That's the usual tactic, with the after school Satan Club being something that, they've been trying since late 2020 to get into the school to compete with was it the Good News Club, or, whatever it is the Christians are selling. And, it took them till February of 2023 before they'd even give them the opportunity. And, I definitely think it was discrimination, but really got me is that when there was this bomb threat you mentioned, they doubled down by victim blaming and said, oh, it caused a lot of trouble and it's too disruptive to the school, so we can't allow you to freely exercise your free speech. Sometimes freedom is messy. It's inconvenient. That's the way it is. But to punish the victims by not allowing them to have their club, they're essentially giving a roadmap to anybody with a grudge. It really, to me, sounded a little bit like, know your place mentality that we hear, with other reactionary viewpoints. I'm not sorry that the ability to exercise the same rights as everybody else has an inconvenience. That's just something they'll just have to deal with. I was really happy to see that they did settle, though, because they were on the losing side. The courts had showed that they were there to protect the rights of the children. The Satanic Temple advocates for freedom and justice, and they don't advocate for devil worship or believing in Satan. It's strictly allegorical, but it works, and it's a reminder to all these school districts that, they do need to protect these rights, and I hope that this continues. But I did notice that June Everett, the director of the Satanic Temple's after-school club programming, said, "It's for the kids that we took on this legal fight in the first place. Let us celebrate this triumph for free speech, religious liberty, and the enduring principles that unite us as society." Now, I know we're on the outside coming in, but, I would have expected that if a God were so offended, he could have managed something more spectacular than an emailed bomb threat. Paul got a road to Damascus treatment, and all we got's a lousy T-shirt. A bomb threat. I'd like better personally. What about you, Scott?
What I liked about what you just said, and I agree with you across the board there, but I liked the phrase that you mentioned, the know your place mentality, because I think that's what's really happening here. I mean, they said in the article that there were Christian clubs that weren't having any problems getting their paperwork correct and stuff like that. And so, we can see what's happening here. We can see what's happening. It's not a secret to anybody. The school boards here, the schools, are succumbing to pressure from the Christian majority in their area. And in these Christian majorities, they talk about things like religious freedom, but what they really want is Christian freedom. And they talk about we need to let more religion into school, but what they really want is more of the Bible into school. And they talk about we need more God, but they really mean Jesus, right? They're not fooling anybody. We can see that the emperor is not wearing any clothes, and it's plain as day. And what really irks me is that, what does it tell you that they have to disguise their intentions this way? They have to kind of like have this haze of respectability on top of this. What does that say about the quality of what you're offering if you have to disguise it? I mean, why the shadow and the subterfuge? Even their own book, I found this in the Bible. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whosoever lives by the truth comes into the light so that it may be seen plainly. And that was from John chapter 3, verse 20. And all I have to say is, the irony there. The irony. It boggles the mind on occasion. CE, what do you got for us?
Well, I thought I'd just take a few minutes to do a tiny little history lesson on this particular issue because it's going to keep happening. So the key case in this space is called Widmer versus Vincent from 1981. This is University of Missouri, did basically the same thing. It was the first time that the Supreme Court came in and said, hey, if you're creating what's called a public forum where students can gather before, during, or after school to do something, you then cannot discriminate based on content. So if you're going to let somebody play, you got to let everybody play. And then in 84, Congress, and keep in mind, we've been talking about this a lot tonight, this is at the height of Reaganism. This is the height of the evangelical push to get the evangelicals enacted. They have been reacting to Roe v. Wade a few years earlier. A lot of Supreme Court decisions during the 60s taking a mandatory prayer out of school, all of that. So in 84, Congress adopts something called the Equal Access Act, which makes this apply to secondary schools. It explicitly says, hey, you've got to let people use these buildings and use these facilities. So that's the history here. And the court has never gone back. They've reaffirmed that for all sorts of schools in 1990 and on. So when this case comes up, it's a surefire win. So these officials, to Infidel's point and to Scott's point, are knowingly, I don't believe they're incompetent. They are knowingly trying to create a pretextual situation to shut down this club. And that must be what this judge thought. So what happened is they said, hey, we've got 2 reasons we're going to shut you down. 1, you violated this obscure rule about how you marketed your club. That's not a reason to shut down the club. And 2, we received an anonymous threat in which the person said, quote, I'm going to come in there and shoot everybody. That's it. That's the sentence that was uttered from an anonymous person. Neither one of those justify the violation of the First Amendment. You have to have a very, very high level of an imminent threat. And an anonymous tip is just not imminent. It's not even an apparent threat, which is the words you need. You need an imminent, apparent threat to life or grievous bodily injury. So, so the judge, the ACLU sued and said, hey, we want an injunction. While this is going through trial, we want you to immediately say this club can start holding sessions again. And the judge agreed. And in order for that judge to agree before trial, he has to find that the school likely violated the First Amendment. In order for him to find that, he had to find that those excuses were just a pretext. So yes, I agree with what Scott's saying, what Infidel's saying, everybody's saying. We know what they're doing. It's obvious, and the courts just aren't falling for it anymore. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention before we go back, I mentioned that it sort of made me sad, and you already picked up on the sad part, that at least one person felt that the name, the After School Satan Club, was enough to say, I'm going to go up. This was a North Carolina person. I'm going to drive up to Pennsylvania and shoot up the school because of this. It reminds me of the ping pong pizza place or whatever it was called, where somebody from North Carolina drove up and pulled out a automatic weapon because he thought that there were a pedophile ring from Hillary Clinton in the basement or something like that. So it's sad that people to this day believe their biblical story so much that they believe that the word Satan is so bad that they're going to turn these kids into little devils, which is what he said. He has since been arrested. I don't know if we mentioned that, but they found out who he was, and they have arrested with him, and he's going to do a lot of time. But the sadder part for me is that states in the United States, various states, spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year defending this sort of lawsuit and settling these sorts of claims. We've had $500,000 judgments. We've had $1 million judgments because these people are so fixated on their religion that it bleeds into their policy. It's like the Christopher Hitchens books, religion poisons everything. The good news that I found when I researched this, 4 Democrats ran for the 4 seats that were up for election. And on November 7th, they all won. What was their platform? They literally said in their campaign, we need to put an end to, quote, unnecessary and financially wasteful, ego-driven legal melodramas. So even in this county, which is around Allentown, an industrial place, it's a typical Democratic city, but a Republican county. Even in this county, that worked, and all 4 Republicans who were supported this ban were voted off, and 4 Democrats who said we need to stop doing this were voted in. So thanks for your attention. Those are the points I wanted to hit. Kelley, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think that's a great point about, because again, you're bringing up the fact that this ideology is not playing well with the American voter, and it's heartening to me. It really is, that people are waking up to it, and I think it's because that they're putting it right out on display for us, the way that they didn't do for the last 3 decades when they got all the advances that they were able to. I hope they keep shouting out as loud as they can, because it's really getting people to stand up and fight back against them. So one of the things that bothered me, and I'm probably going to be the odd man out on the panel today, is now this guy from North Carolina, he called in the death threat. It was anonymous at the time. He was convicted. He was arrested. He was convicted. How serious was this? Was this guy really serious about doing what he said he was going to do? And when we name a club with Satan in the name, are we endangering the children? Are we putting the children's safety in danger to make a political point? And that's what I worry about. And this isn't the last club that we talked about was in Illinois, and they had the same that was the same thing that happened there. is they were having death threats. They had bomb threats at the school. And that was one of the reasons they closed it down as well. They also used some bullshit. We didn't file the paperwork correctly stuff too. And that I think is bullshit. But I think it's reasonable to think about the safety of these children. And it makes me wonder if we just change the name of the club, the Satanic Temple can still fund it. You can even put their name real small down in the corner of the flyer if you want to. But I think when we do that, we're creating the environment that brings out these crazies. And we really might be endangering the children. And that I kind of worry about. So, Infidel, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Unfortunately, going to a school these days is a dangerous thing all on its own. And
I get that, but should we be adding to that already dangerous
and I get that. And at some point, we have to ask ourselves, what is our goal? And that is a reality because, like was touched on earlier, when they say freedom of speech, they're really talking about, there's a little asterisk at the end of freedom of speech. It's kind of like when Ray and I watch football and something happens against our team and the ref rules wrong, we're like, oh yeah, we forgot. In the rule book, there's that asterisk at the end of that rule that says, except the New Orleans Saints. So, freedom of speech means there's an asterisk that says for Christians, for people that think like me more specifically, because they'll quibble among themselves when it comes down to getting what they want, because they don't even agree. But with that in mind, we are seeing, as cross-examiner said, that pushback, because it is rather obvious. And I am hopeful, because time and again, we talk about these groups that lobby for the absolute worst things for our students, who fixate time and money getting people on a school board for, over LGBTQ or equality, or in some states, slavery being a good thing sometimes. But with these issues, we're starting to see that kind of pushback coming from the community with obvious things like the First Amendment, because this is already established. This is well established. This isn't something that's, fly by night or something that we just discovered or some new realization. This is something that really is the First Amendment. You don't get more to the top than that. And having said that, that aspect is one of those things that's costing a lot of money. It's costing a lot of people a lot of money just so somebody can score political points because they believe something shouldn't be done. And that is really sad. And with that in mind, I do hope that dies out some. Kelley? Scott?
We're running out of time, but I want to give Scott and
Sure.
I want to give Scott and cross-examiner each a minute to respond to what I said. I think they both had something to say back to me. So please, Scott, you
you were mentioning about endangering the children, and of course that is the primary immediate concern here. But we also need to, and I'm not trying to make an excuse here. I'm not trying to justify it. But yes, if having a club with the name Satan in it will increase the risk, with a non-zero increase of risk for the kids. However, giving in to that kind of pressure and allowing society to develop in such a way as that kind of thing is okay and works, I think also is not a negligible amount of risk that we have to balance there. And so yes, I think we do what we can to protect the children in the situation that they're in. But we also need to keep in mind, we need to bear in mind the future, right? And so we need to, the things that we do today, the decisions we make today, the stands we make today will affect what type of events will come in and affect our future, our children's children, and so on and so forth. Cross-examiner, why don't you wrap us up here?
Sure. The ACLU did address your concerns, Kelley, and I agree with you. It is provocative for a reason. I don't think that they should have kids participate in that club because they're not making an adult informed choice as to the risk they're taking. But the ACLU in their motions did say, hey, if you honor this vague threat, anonymous threat, this non-serious threat, you're giving anybody in this country a heckler's veto. They can disrupt the proceedings, no problem. And as for who should be able to participate, I think once you get into sort of your teens, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, it reminds me of Jessica Alquist, right? She was the one who, I think she was in Pennsylvania too, fought against a school who had the 10 Commandments on display in their gym for as long as they could remember. She sued, had the school take them down. She had to have the police provide her with escorts, because not only were students harassing her, adults were, and a state representative called her, you may remember this, an evil little thing, which encouraged even more abuse. And as a side note, that person, the guy that called her an evil little thing, was later arrested for embezzlement. So we know who these people are who do this.
Just as a side note too, there was just recently an incident with Telltale's daughter, same kind of a deal. So yeah.
So yeah, I think I agree with you, Kelley. Be provocative with the older kids who can make a more informed decision. But yeah, we can't give people a heckler's veto.
One of the problems too is like there was only 4 students in this club, and when you have death threats like that, that's going to keep the students away. You know, the parents are going to have the same kind of idea like I just brought up, and they're not going to want to send their students to it. So it kind of hurts there too. And I don't know how we can stop those death threats. I really don't. I wish I did. I wish I really did.
Yeah.
If you want to continue this conversation, though, check out our fan-run Facebook group and the Discord server. Leave some comments below. We love to hear from you. And if you'd like to hear more from the nonprofits, check us out right here.